Welcome back to the Choice Morning Answer with John Anthony. Before we go to our guest, we got a calls on the line. Let's go to Eric from Southfield. Eric, you there?
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Thank you for taking my call. Yeah, sorry, it's a truck. Listen, I know you have a guest come on, but I want to say this to everybody that's in the listening audience. We are not going to sacrifice our kids for some kind of perverted move or any group. I don't know why we don't protect the kids anymore.
Yeah.
But what I just heard, and remember I called you earlier and I said, I had to get away from that Democratic Party.
Yeah.
I had no idea how perverted and the bills, the destructive stuff that they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And to the point where they're trying to push it.
Yeah.
These kids, ladies and gentlemen, these kids need our help. And you know what? We're going to protect them.
Amen.
And you're hearing this from an African American. I am a Republican.
Yeah.
Okay. And I am very disgusted that I voted for that party for years and had no idea what I was doing until I started researching.
Man, isn't that the way,
it's a disgusting party.
Isn't that the way?
They are disgusting.
As soon as you start researching, you find it out. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate this call, man.
Thank you.
All right. Patrick, make it quick.
Hey, John. First of all, hand salute to my fellow veterans today on Veterans Day. And I suspect that the International Olympic Committee is run by Democrats. They just figured out that men are different from women.
Didn't they ban all of them, though, from participating this year?
Yeah, I mean, they're reconsidering their position. But how could they not know what everybody else with common sense knew?
Well, the wokeness, man, is what's permeating every aspect of our society, Patrick.
Well, one last thing. Fetterman, I think he may have a career in politics.
I think so.
Now he can say, look, I put the American people above my party.
So true. Thanks, brother. Appreciate the call,
right,
Patrick. You know, as you think about this government shutdown, I think this moment requires us to think more deeply about the slogans that we hear as it relates to these parties. You know, we are told that when the government shuts down, the economy teeters. We're told that subsidies, especially the Obamacare health subsidies, are compassionate policy. Yet the reality often reveals something very different. Markets tell a different story, as our next guest will let us know. Incentives tell a different story. And the real cost is not what Congress appropriates, but what government consumes from the private economy. Today, we are joined by someone who has argued from the beginning that economic freedom is not just about tax rates, but about where real resources are allowed to go and to grow. He's John Tamny. He's the author of Deficit Delusion, Why Everything Left, Right, and Supply Side Tells You About the National Debt is Wrong. He's the political economy editor at Forbes, senior economic advisor. No. He's the editor of Real Clear Markets. John Tamny, welcome back to Detroit's Morning Answer.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Now, John, you argue that the real cost of government is not measured in dollars, but in the real resources it absorbs. When the government shuts down, what actually shifts in the real economy?
Nothing, because the real economy is not government. Government only exists insofar as the real economy produces resources for it. And so we just go on with our lives, and I think that's why this shutdown lasted so long. Americans didn't notice it, and they didn't care. They've seen this movie before. Yeah. And I would add that if we would do what every other country in the world does, just logically, if we would make it so that security at airports, that these were privately employed individuals,
yes,
which is how it should be, the shutdown would still go on because Americans recognize, they've seen so many times, government shuts down and our lives don't change one iota.
Yeah. So, John Tamny, why do politicians frame reopening government as, I'm doing air quotes, saving the economy? Now, if the markets continue functioning normally during shutdown, what does that tell us about the true role of government in economic production?
Well, it tells us that government is only a cost. It's never an additive thing. And for obvious reasons. Why does Peru have less government spending than the United States? Well, it has much less economically productive people. The government gets its sustenance from us. And so life goes on for us. And it hopefully wakes Americans up to this truth. Economists will tell you that government spending powers economic growth. The fraudulent number that is GDP actually grows if government spends more, which is a sign that GDP amounts to double counting in ways that would shock even the most crooked of accountants. But in the real world, the only economy is the private economy.
Yeah. Now, we were told when they were trying to pass the Affordable Care Act, is affectionately known as Obamacare, that subsidy lowered costs for families. Yet premiums and deductibles have increased dramatically. From your perspective, why did subsidies drive prices up instead of down?
Well, because what is insurance? It's just people getting together and saying, most of us won't get sick in a given year on a given day, so let's pool our resources. And so when one of us gets sick, you're covered, but the others aren't because they don't need it. Obamacare basically said it doesn't matter how sick you are. It doesn't matter your situation. Come one, come all. Well, that's suddenly no longer a market. And so is it any surprise that premiums have gone way up? What we should have and what we would have in a free market is people would get insurance for catastrophic, which we all want. If we get hit by a truck tomorrow, we want to make sure that we're covered. But for day-to-day doctor visits, we would never have insurance for that. We would just price it.
Yeah. When you just said something that it struck something in my mind. You said free markets. When you hear politicians who are running saying that they support free markets, are they? And how would you define what a true free market is?
Well, I think politicians get to Washington on the view that free markets are better because they are. They're just undeniably better. Compare South Korea to North Korea at night, and you can see what works, markets or lack of markets. It's all there. But politicians, remember, they have incentives too, and they want to retire grandly. And their retirement is rooted in Washington being a bit dysfunctional, in Washington having some control over the economy, in Washington being the biggest spender in the economy, because once they're out of office, they can then get jobs lobbying the movement of that money. And so the incentives change. The longer you're there, you're staying there because you know that you're going to have a more gilded retirement once you stop, because you've got connections. You know everyone in every congressional office, and you can put up a shingle as a lobbyist and make a lot of money. And so there's never an incentive from either side to shrink the government too much.
Yeah, and you have insider information still when you retire. That's the real deal. But in your book, Deficit Delusion, you argued that the national debt is misunderstood, not because of the numbers, but because of how we misunderstand what money actually is. What is the most important misconception you want to correct?
Well, I want to correct the misconception that we have the debt because we've overspent. And to be clear, we've overspent. But we have the debt because Americans are massively overtaxed. And because they are, people are lining up to lend to the United States because they know that Americans produce enormous amounts of taxable wealth every year. Yeah. And so if you want to shrink the debt, you've got to substantially shrink the amount of money, particularly the rich, that they're paying the federal government every year. The rich, forget about tax rates. Even if it were 1% in the United States, Americans' richest are so productive that even if they had a 1% tax rate, they would hand over enormous amounts of money to Washington every year. Yeah. And that's what enables the debt. Any entity that's taking in lots of dollars can borrow easily. So unless we're willing to say, you know what, it's not just immoral to treat the rich differently. It's not just horrible for the economy to overtax them. The fact that they are overtaxed is why we have debt. So if you want to get rid of it, stop taxing the rich. Will either party ever do anything about this? Color me skeptical.
You know, I think about what New York just did with Mandami. You know, one of the central themes in your book is that the federal government cannot spend what the private economy has not first created. Why is that principle so important in today's political debates? And as you look towards New York, I mean, what does that theme in your book speak to what New York, what's ahead for New York?
Well, you put it so well. Government can't spend what it hasn't gotten from its first. That's got to be stressed over and over again, because politicians always say, well, if we're not spending, the economy will collapse. Not true. You only have that money because you got it from us. And so for every American, recognize this. All the things they're promising you because they took it from you first. From there, with New York, what I will say is, in a city that rich, invariably demagogues like Mamdani are going to come along. And I'll just say, I'm trusting the New Yorkers to walk all over them. People don't come to New York to be given handouts. They don't come for government services. They don't come for minimum wages, for government grocery stores and all that. They come to New York because they have big dreams.
Yes.
There are tons of people from Detroit, New York, from Chicago,
Yes.
from Los Angeles, from Miami. This is where you go to reinvent yourself. It's the most beautiful American story in the world. New York is a city of immigrants, not just from around the world, but from around the United States. People who love themselves so much they said, I'm going to try to succeed on the biggest of stages. They will own this guy, Mamdani, and they will, because New Yorkers would never let someone so incompetent, someone so small, take away from them what they've created.
I think there's a song, New York, big city of dreams.
Darn right, man.
You are so right. I think this also, though, because there's flaws, and I pointed this out on my show maybe last week. There's a flaw in his agenda. He has to get permission from the state to enact a lot of his agenda. Do you think, based on that if Elise Stefanik has declared that she's running for governor of New York, do you think that opens the door for other New Yorkers, the state of New York, to look at her as the backdrop and send her down to Albany to represent and fight back against the Mamdani invasion?
Oh, yeah. Look, and that's the other night. We're not a dictatorship here, and New York isn't either. What did Barack Obama say once he got into office?
Elections?
He said, I realized once I was in office how hard it is to get things done.
Yeah.
We have checks and balances, not just in the U.S., but around the country. Mamdani can promise a lot of things. It's going to be much harder to give them. And added to that, once again, New Yorkers will walk all over him. They're not the kind of people that are going to let their enterprise be taken away from them. And amen to that. New York's a great city. The U.S. is a great country. We innovate around politicians. We're too fast for them. We're way too innovative for them to bring us down.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on President Trump saying that he's going to send $2,000 of the tariff revenue to American citizens?
We Americans don't like that. We don't need. No one elected Trump because they wanted handouts.
Yeah.
No one elected Trump because they thought that they could compete with the rest of the world. And so I don't like it. I don't like government collecting taxes in the first place, and I don't like government giving out the money. I think Trump's got to recognize why he's there. People like him. They like rich people.
Yeah. And
that's one of the reasons they liked him. They don't want these things. They don't want handouts from government. They want freedom from government.
Now, President Trump has said that he's going to collect over $19 trillion over amount of years. When will the American people see the effects of some of the foreign trades and things of that nature that President Trump has conducted? Places like Saudi Arabia and I think they've all by themselves $1 to $2 trillion that they're going to invest in the American economy. When will we see the effects of that?
I think it's going to take a while because it's hard to do. I think it's rare that you get a good effect from government planning the arrival of money. I think what we're ultimately going to see, I've got my fingers crossed, is that the Supreme Court, largely many of judges whom Trump appointed, will save Trump from himself. The tariffs were a mistake. They were and are. Anything that makes it more difficult for people to divide up work with people around the world impoverishes them. And that's why, and I think the stock market being at all-time highs, and let's be clear, Donald Trump loves a high stock market. That's a signal from the markets that they don't think the Supreme Court's going to let the tariffs stand. That's good. That's good for the United States.
Yeah.
So, we don't hide from competition. Competition is what makes us great.
How do we deal with the tariff? Because we're upside down with a lot of different countries. What's the fix as it relates to countries in our market, but we can't go to theirs? How do we fix that?
We'll never forget that the whole world is desperate to have American products.
Yeah.
In China right now, there's 5,500 McDonald's on the way to 10,000 in 2 years. There's 7,300 Starbucks in China 2 weeks ago. That's probably 8,000 now.
Wow.
The whole world loves our products. Never forget when the McDonald's opened up in the Soviet Union, 30,000 people showed up.
I remember.
Don't ever forget that. We don't need to worry about what the rest of the world does, because the United States, it's not just that we have great products, but our products represent freedom.
I just saw an article
the world
about
will
that.
always figure out a way to get our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't need, if the rest of the world wants to harm its people by putting up tariffs, let them.
Yeah.
Let's not do it to us, and let's not do it to us knowing that the whole world will figure out a way to buy American because they love it.
John Tamny, where can people go get your book, Deficit Delusion, Why Everything Left, Right, and Supply Side Tells You About the National Debt is Wrong?
They can buy one, but they can buy several copies if they want on Amazon. I think it's in some bookstores too, but all my books are on Amazon. And buy as many as you want. There's no limit.
Yeah, I don't know if you can tell I read it by some of the questions I posed to you today, but I did go buy it and read it. And it was a very good read. So, John Tamny, political economy editor at Forbes and editor of Real Clear Markets, author of the book, Deficit Delusion, Why Everything Left, Right, and Supply Side Tells You About the National Debt is Wrong. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, John.
All right, my brother. Detroit's Morning Answer. We'll be right back.